Welcome to Iron Will Stories. Before we begin this story of hidden identity, deadly revenge, and the price of justice, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these voices alive. Harold was grocery shopping. 67 years old, retired accountant, shopping list in hand. He stopped at the canned goods aisle and heard a familiar voice behind him. Agent Romano? Harold's heart stopped. He hadn't heard that name in 15 years, because according to official records, Agent Romano was dead. Harold Brennan lived alone in a small house on Maple Street. At 67, he was a thin, quiet man with thick glasses and perfectly combed gray hair. His neighbors knew him as Quiet Mr. Harold, a harmless retiree who kept to himself. Every morning at 7 a.m., he'd wake up, make his coffee, read the newspaper, then head out for his daily grocery run. Even though he'd retired 2 years ago after 35 years in accounting, he maintained the same predictable routine. His life was orderly, boring, and safe. During his 3-decade career, Harold's clients had described him as honest, reliable, and forgettably quiet. He'd never married, had no children, no social life to speak of. His only hobbies were solving crossword puzzles and listening to classical music on his old radio. His neighbors had noticed only one odd thing about Harold. He never took vacations. Saving money, he'd always say. But the real reason was far more complicated than anyone could imagine. That Thursday morning, Harold had gone to Pine Valley Supermarket for his usual shopping trip. His list contained the ordinary items of a solitary life: milk, bread, canned beans, pasta. The mundane groceries of a mundane existence. He'd stopped at the canned goods aisle, examining different brands of beans, when he heard heavy footsteps approaching from behind. Normally, he wouldn't pay attention, but there was something familiar about the rhythm of those steps. Slow, measured, dangerous. Agent Romano? Harold's hand froze on the can. That voice. It was one of the last voices he'd heard 15 years ago. He turned around slowly. Standing before him was Tony Marconi, mid-50s, thick build, expensive suit. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "I was going to call you Romano, but you're retired accountant Harold now, aren't you?" Harold's face went pale. Tony Marconi, Vincent Marconi's son. When his father was imprisoned 15 years ago, Tony had been 35. Now he was running the family business. "You've got me confused with someone else," Harold said, trying to keep his voice steady. Tony smiled, a dangerous smile. "No, Harold, or Agent Romano. I know exactly who you are. You're the man who brought down my father." Harold tried to push his cart away, but Tony followed. "We looked for you for 15 years. The FBI listed you as dead in their records. But I always knew you were alive." Harold walked quickly toward the checkout counter. Tony followed, close enough to be threatening, but not obvious enough to draw attention. Damn it, Harold thought. 15 years of hidden life had just been compromised in an instant. While waiting in line, Tony moved beside him. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "I'm not going to do anything here, but we need to talk." Harold paid for his groceries, took his bags, and walked outside. Tony was right behind him. In the parking lot, he stopped. "What do you want, Tony?" "Justice," Tony said simply. "My father died in prison because of you. Your father was guilty. He was a killer, drug dealer, an extortionist. He was my father," Tony said, "and you destroyed him. In 1989, there was no Harold Brennan. There was only FBI agent Michael Romano, 28 years old, Special Operations Specialist, Organized Crime Division. Romano's mission was to infiltrate the Vincent Marconi crime family. The Marconis were one of New York's most powerful mafia families. Drugs, extortion, murder. They had their hands in every dirty business imaginable. Romano had created the Harold Brennan identity, a quiet, trustworthy accountant working for a small firm. the perfect cover to handle the Marconi family's financial operations. For 3 years, he lived as Harold Brennan. He kept the Marconi family's books, laundered their money, helped them evade taxes, all while recording everything and reporting back to the FBI. In 1992, the massive operation began. Using information provided by Romano, the FBI arrested 127 people. Vincent Marconi, his son Tony, his brothers, all the lieutenants. Romano's identity was exposed. Death threats started pouring in. The FBI placed him in witness protection. Agent Michael Romano died, and Harold Brennan officially came to life. For 15 years he lived on Maple Street, a man who forgot his real identity and learned to become an ordinary accountant, until Tony Marconi found him. "My father died of cancer in prison," Tony said. "Alone, sick, a broken man, because you destroyed him." Harold took a deep breath. "Vincent Marconi killed 23 people, Tony. 23 innocent people. How many families did he destroy? Those were the rules of our world. You came from the outside, infiltrated us, gained our trust, and betrayed us. I did my job. And now I'm going to do mine." That night, Harold couldn't sleep. Tony finding him meant others could find him too. 15 years of safe living had come to an end. The next morning, he found an envelope at his door. Inside was an old photograph, Vincent Marconi's funeral. On the back, it read, "I can't bring my father back, but I can send you to join him." Harold called the FBI. His old contact, Agent Sandra Mills, was still working there. "Romano? My God, are you alive? Sandra, we have a problem. Marconi's son found me. Get down here immediately." Harold was entering the FBI building for the first time in 15 years. Step by step, his old identity as Agent Romano was returning. Sandra Mills was now a division chief. "We've been tracking Tony Marconi," she said. "He's rebuilt his father's organization, more dangerous than before." "What do you suggest?" "You have two options. Either we relocate you to another city or what? Or you finish him." Harold was shocked. "What do you mean?" "Tony Marconi has about 50 crimes on his record, but we can't prove any of them. He's too smart, too careful. But his obsession with you might push him to make mistakes." Sandra's plan was simple. Harold would provoke Tony, force him to make errors. The FBI would plant listening devices, catch Tony red-handed. "It's dangerous," Harold said, "but effective. You were our best undercover agent, Romano. Tony knows you, but he doesn't know your old skills." Harold agreed, because he knew Tony wouldn't stop. Sooner or later he would kill Harold Brennan. At least he wanted to die as Agent Romano. Harold sent Tony a message. "We need to talk. Oak Park, 8 p.m. Tony came. They sat on an isolated bench in the park. "You called me?" Tony said, surprised. "Yes, because I need to tell you something." "What?" "Your father was murdered." Tony froze. "What?" "Vincent didn't die of cancer in prison. He was killed by a rival family. I just found out." This was a lie, of course, but a necessary lie to enrage Tony. "You're lying," Tony said, but there was doubt in his voice too. "The Cellini family. While your father was in prison, you took over their territory. They took revenge." Tony stood up. "Do you have proof?" "I do, but I'll give it to you under one condition." "What?" "Leave me alone. Let me continue living as retired accountant Harold. In exchange, I'll give you evidence against the Cellini family." Tony thought about it. The fire of revenge burned in his eyes. 24 hours, he said. "In 24 hours, you'll have my answer." Sandra Mills had been listening to the conversation. "Perfect," she said. "Tony will now investigate the Cellini family. When he attacks them, we'll catch him." But things didn't go as planned. Tony was smart, like his father. He investigated first, then acted. And his investigation revealed Harold's lie. When Harold returned home, his door was open. 3 men were inside. Tony's men. "Tony's waiting for you," they said. They forced Harold into a car and took him to a warehouse. Tony was waiting there. "The Cellini family has been at peace with my father for 10 years, Tony said. "They didn't kill him. You tried to manipulate me." Harold remained silent. "But don't worry. We can play this game. You were an FBI agent, and I've learned how to play too." Tony handed Harold a phone. "Call the FBI. Call Sandra Mills. Tell her Tony Marconi is here, ready to surrender." Harold didn't understand. "What?" "Either you call the FBI and lure them into a trap, or you die right now. Your choice." Harold took the phone. But instead of dialing, he pressed a hidden button. The panic button Sandra had given him. "I'm calling," he said. But actually, he was sending his coordinates to the FBI. 20 minutes later, the FBI raided the warehouse. SWAT teams, helicopters, full force. Tony and his men resisted. A firefight broke out. Harold hid in the back. Eventually, Tony was captured. He was shot in the leg while trying to escape. "This isn't over, Romano," he shouted. "I'll find you." Tony Marconi's trial lasted 8 months. Harold testified with his identity kept secret. Tony's crimes were proven one by one. He received a life sentence to join his father behind the cold prison walls. As Harold left the courtroom, he looked at Tony one last time. "Justice has been served," he said quietly. After the trial, the FBI offered Harold a new identity, new city, new life. "No," Harold said. "Harold Brennan has truly become me now. I've lived with this identity for 15 years. Maple Street is my home." Sandra understood. "But your safety?" "Tony's organization is disbanded. The danger is past. I want to live as Harold Brennan." Harold returned to his house on Maple Street. His neighbors thought he'd been out of town for 3 months due to a family emergency. "Mr. Harold, we missed you," said his neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. "I missed you too," Harold said, and this time, he really meant it. That evening, sitting in his house, he reflected on his 15-year journey. Agent Michael Romano had died, but Harold Brennan was alive, and this time, he was truly himself. Months later, Harold read in the local newspaper that Tony Marconi had been killed in prison by rival inmates. Justice had found its own way. Harold folded the newspaper and sipped his coffee. There was no identity left to return to. Agent Romano had taken his place in history. Harold Brennan would live his future. That day, he went to the supermarket. He stopped at the canned goods aisle. This time, no one called him Agent Romano from behind. There was only Harold, retired accountant Harold. And that was exactly how he wanted it. In Harold's study at home, hidden among the books, was a small box. Inside were Agent Michael Romano's FBI badge, a few old photographs, and a letter. The letter was from Vincent Marconi, written from prison. "Agent Romano, I will find you." Harold burned the letter. Vincent was dead, Tony too. The threat no longer existed. He scattered the ashes to the wind and focused on living the rest of his life as Harold Brennan, without anyone knowing. Because sometimes the greatest victory is the one nobody knows about. So I ask you now, have you ever encountered someone who had to completely change their identity? Someone living a double life? Share their story in the comments. At Iron Will Stories, we honor hidden heroes and secret pasts. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please share it, subscribe, and help us continue honoring those who sacrifice everything for justice. And remember, sometimes the most ordinary-looking people have the most extraordinary stories.